Hi, first graders. If we were in school right now, we would be reading books by Cynthia Rylant. She writes the Mr. Putter and Tabby series. She reads, she wrote Poppleton, the pig books, and her most famous ones that you guys probably know are Henry and Mudge. So we are going to read Mr. Putter and Tabby, Pick the Pears. This book is kind of like a chapter book, boys and girls, because it's divided up into little parts, okay? So it's kind of like a chapter book. First section is called Pear Jelly. It was fall, and juicy things were growing in Mr. Putter's backyard. Juicy apples, juicy tomatoes, and juicy pears. Mr. Putter walked with his fine cat, Tabby, among the juicy things, and he dreamed. He dreamed of apple pie and apple turnovers. He dreamed of hot apple cider with a cinnamon stick and stuffed red tomatoes. But most of all, he dreamed of pear jelly. Mr. Putter loved pear jelly. He had loved it since he was a boy. Fall was his favorite season because of pear jelly. And now it was time, Tabby, said Mr. Putter. It is time to pick the pears. Tabby loved it when Mr. Putter said it was time to do something. She was old, but she was still liked excitement. She followed Mr. Putter into the garage where he found a ladder for pear picking. Then they went to the backyard where all the excitement was. Okay, this chapter is called Cranky Legs. Mr. Putter had a problem. It was a ladder problem. Mr. Putter set his ladder against the pear tree, but he couldn't get up the ladder. Last year he got up the ladder, but this year he had cranky legs. Cranky legs, cranky knees, and cranky feet. He stepped onto the ladder and his legs were so cranky, he had to get right off again. One trouble with being old, said Mr. Putter, is being cranky. Tabby knew what he meant. She had a cranky tail. Some days it was so cranky it wouldn't swish. It just stuck in the air like a stick. Cranky legs and cranky tails are no fun when you're old, especially if you want pear jelly. Mr. Putter looked at the pears still in his tree, and he thought, and thought, and thought, and thought. Tabby curled herself up and waited. She liked excitement, but she could wait for it. Okay, this chapter is called Zing. What I need, said Mr. Putter at last, is a good slingshot. Mr. Putter knew about slingshots. He had played with them as a boy. They were good for knocking cans off logs, so they must be good for knocking pears off trees. Tabby followed him into the house to make a slingshot. Mr. Putter found a pair of old underwear that he didn't like. He didn't like it because it was covered with poodles. His brother had given him the underwear for his birthday. His brother loved the underwear. He thought it was funny. Mr. Putter did not. Look at those pink underwear, boys and girls. That's pretty funny. So he cut up the underwear and got some good elastic. Then he got an old glove. Then he got a stick and he made his slingshot. Mr. Putter and Tabby went back to the pear tree. Mr. Putter needed something hard and round to sling. Many of his apples had already fallen, so he picked up an apple. He put the apple in the slingshot. He aimed at a pear in the tree and pulled back as hard as he could. Zing! The hard, round apple went flying up, 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 over Mr. Putter's pear tree, over Mr. Putter's apple tree, over Mr. Putter's chimney, and over Mr. Putter's house. Mr. Putter and Tabby watched as it flew out of sight. Said Mr. Putter. He picked up another apple. Zing! Up, 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 over, 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 out of sight. Wow, said Mr. Putter. He was smiling. He might have cranky legs, but he sure had jiffy hands. He picked up another apple. Zing! Another apple. Zing! And another. Zing! He forgot all about the pears. Tabby liked the first zings, but by the 7th zing, she began to yawn. By the 10th zing, she began to nod. And by the 14th zing, she was sound asleep. Mr. Putter played with his slingshot all afternoon. He played through tea time. He played through supper time. He played until dark when he couldn't see the apples go up anymore. When he was finished, he had no apples and no pear jelly. He was a little embarrassed. He picked up Tabby and sneaked inside. This one is called Juicy Days. The next afternoon, Mr. Putter and Tabby were sitting on their porch. They were feeling sorry for themselves because they still had no pear jelly. Suddenly, Mr. Putter's neighbor, Mrs. Teaberry, and her good dog Zeke came by. Mrs. Teaberry was carrying a big basket, a very big basket. She said to Mr. Putter, "It is amazing. When I woke up this morning, there were dozens of apples in my front yard, and I don't even have an apple tree." Mr. Putter looked at Tabby. "Amazing," he said. "So I made an apple feast," said Mrs. Teaberry. In the basket, she had 14 apple turnovers, 5 apple pies, 6 apple jellies, and a gallon of hot apple cider with cinnamon sticks. Mr. Putter and Tabby ate juicy things for days and days, and when he was finishing the last apple pie, Mr. Putter had an idea about those pears still on his pear tree. He would wait for them all to fall off. Then he would get his slingshot and start zinging. Why do you think he's going to start zinging? Do you think it's because he wants the neighbor to make all his treats for him? That's pretty sneaky, but it's a very good idea because she made all of those apple treats for him. So now he's just going to wait and then zing all those pears over to Mrs. Teaberry, and then she'll make him lots of treats. Alrighty, guys, see ya.